Hello everybody, this is Fernando for the latest Cryptids and Monsters video. Alright, let's go ahead and let's do part 2 of chapter 5 of the book Occult Investigator, Real Cases from the Files of X-Investigations by Bob Johnson. In this case, it's titled The Satanist Next Door. Last time we left off, it looks like there was a neighbor that was describing the horrible situations she had with the quote-unquote Satanist next door to her. She was about to describe more details associated with her encounters. That's where we last left off. So without further ado, let's go ahead and let's continue that part, and then I'll throw my own thoughts and opinions on it here afterwards. So here's essentially what they stated. Aggie threw on a robe and then went to Sadie's aid. As Sadie told Aggie her story, her eyes darted repeatedly to the closed bathroom door. Aggie wanted to see the phenomenon for herself and opened that bathroom door, only to discover that there was nothing but a wet spot where Sadie said there had been hundreds of water bugs scrambling and climbing up the wall. It was the damnedest thing, Bobby, Sadie told me. I know what I saw, but when Aggie opened that door, there was nothing, not a bug in sight. Of course, I explained to Sadie that her imagination may have gotten the better of her, what with the dream and the upsetting encounter earlier in the evening, but then she reached into her drought-stressed pocket and then pulled out a Polaroid photo of her bathroom floor teeming with water bugs in the very spot Sadie had claimed they were gathered. I took this picture the very next night because I knew I wasn't going crazy. These Satanists were having some kind of loud ceremony or orgy down there that I heard through the walls. They woke me up, but I was prepared. They put a curse on me, and then here's the proof, Sadie said as she handed me the picture. It was hard to explain for sure, but Sadie did have a photo to back up her story. Further investigations into the building turned up other bizarre events. A few of the tenants noted that the black child's eyes changed color from black to green. They swore to me that they saw the dog a number of times late at night, and its eyes were never the same. They said that they knew it was the same dog each time because it had an identifying gray spot near its left ear. Aggie was convinced the dog was a demon that took the shape of an animal, and that's why its eyes colors changed. It's a demon dog from hell that does the beating of these creeps, she said. Other reports told of strong odors, slamming doors in the hallways, insect sightings, and an overall sense of dread. A young couple on the ground floor told me that each Sunday after they attended the local Roman Catholic church, they would always feel a sense of calm after they left and returned home. But in the last few months, they felt fine until they entered their building. Recently, that sense of peace was suddenly washed away as soon as we got home. Sometimes we would get into arguments over nothing. It's eerie, disturbing, the couple said. The neighbors who lived next to 7S in apartment 7R, who originally started the inquiries because of the strange noises that they heard, confirmed the odd aura of the building on 11th Avenue. They said they were experiencing a string of bad luck unlike they've ever had before. I couldn't dismiss all of the claims made by the tenants, nor could I believe everything I was being told. What I did know was that my initial curiosity had turned into a 2-week investigation, and I had to get to the bottom of the problem. At a tenant meeting organized by Aggie, I heard clamors and demands for exorcisms and cleansing spells. Sadie said we needed to have the parish priest bless the building immediately. The couple next door to 7S wanted the Hastings evicted, but I convinced them to let me experience firsthand one of those meetings in 7S that they claimed sparked those weird events. I asked Aggie to call me the next time the group gathered, and I would tell them what I thought they should do. Her call came 2 nights later. It's happening, Bobby. The Satanists are gathering tonight. I already heard the furniture being moved, and that's always the beginning. They have to make room for their orgies and black masses, Aggie said. It was about 6:30 Friday night, and I told her to calm down and that I would be there before 8 o'clock. We had set up a makeshift spy center and utility closet down the hall from 7S where I could secretly observe and record what was happening. I had some electronic gear, a super sensitive listening and eavesdropping device with an attached recorder, a pinhole camera with a fiber optic cable that we mounted on the top molding of the Hastings front door, and a handheld digital video camera with extreme low light sensitivity. It was advantageous to be working with a licensed private investigator for those James Bond gadgets alone. Because Aggie was the superintendent of the building, we knew that although what we were doing was technically an invasion of privacy, loopholes in the tenant's lease agreement said that the building super had the right to inspect the apartment at any time, so we had decided to take a chance. At about 10 p.m., the black-clad group started to arrive as couples, groups, and singles. I expected to see a freak show of wild leather-clad S&M types, leftover punks, and a host of goth culture Marilyn Manson wannabes, but those who entered 7S were mostly subdued-looking people, albeit many dressed in black, but a number of them clad in what could only describe as vintage clothing, neat, but definitely from a bygone era. They had all entered in a very orderly way, and there was no evidence of any sacrificial animals of any kind. I've been privy to Santeria rituals in New York where animal sacrifice was performed as part of a religious ceremony, but if these people were in fact Satanists who were indeed performing blood sacrifices in a residential building, we would have seen some recourse to oust the disturbing tenants, even if that was only a ruse to eliminate some otherworldly presence. But there was no evidence of any animal except the very large black chow that was greeted cheerfully by the guests. I was a bit suspicious when I heard the dog called Blank, which is the name of an obscure demon. The time moved quickly as I eyeballed the characters attending the gathering. I counted 11 people. That meant 13 in total with the Hastings, the preferred number of a witch's coven. And just as Aggie had described, at midnight, the chatter and clinking of glasses ceased. The apartment fell silent for a few minutes. So silent, in fact, I briefly thought everyone might have left. But then I heard the sound of a gong being struck. It resonated 3 times and then fell silent. I have to admit I felt odd in my enclosed space, odd as though someone or something, like a fog, had entered not only the apartment down the hall, but the entire building. The next thing I heard was a man's voice reciting. He was definitely delivering some kind of homily because I heard the guests respond in unison in a hushed tone. Shortly after the ceremony began, a strong odor of incense wafted into my room. I recognized it as predominantly frankincense with a hint of sulfur. This combination in itself made me wonder whether it had been deliberately combined as some blasphemous concoction, considering frankincense is used in Roman Catholic ceremonies. And so I adjusted the dials of my listening and recording device so I could pick up the ritual clearly. Oddly enough, the recording perfectly stored the following. I command you, O all demons dwelling in these parts, or in what part of the world soever ye may be, whatever power may be given to you by the powerful principality of the abysses, both general and special demons, whether dwelling in the east, west, north, or south, do our bidding this night. We summon ye too, O Master of Darkness, Prince of Light, Ruler of Earth and 9 gates, to come and then take the form of your earthbound servant. At this point, the recording stopped, although I know the machine was running and fully charged. It had uncannily recorded only a small portion of the ceremony that I could hear completely as I eavesdropped from my closet. I remember that the homily and responses grew louder as the ceremony continued. For nearly half an hour, I continually heard the words, "Hail blank," in a loud group voice. By this time, the strong smell of incense had me slightly woozy and then somewhat nauseous. I think I drifted off into a nap or short sleep because I recall waking abruptly to the party sounds, once again coming from 7S. Apparently, the ceremony was over and the revelry has started again. But this time, the party sounds were different. I could hear distinct female voices giggling and then footsteps running around the apartment. At first, the sounds of sexual moans and groans that I thought were imagination became very clear. There seemed to be a full-blown orgy going on in 7S. I began to hear screams of pleasure and what sounded like the slapping of flesh. There was now distinct music being played, a classical piece that I couldn't place, but it was definitely a rhythmic, lusty composition that was whipping the guests into a frenzy. This orgy lasted several hours. I could see from under the front door that the rooms were illuminated with candlelight, and my camera caught an occasional glimpse of shadows that flickered eerily into the hallway door. In between the classical music, I could hear the banging of the gong, and then silence, and then the gong once again in what I imagine was probably a sexual act viewed collectively by the group. It's legendary for Satanists to use sex as a powerful magical stimulus and catalyst for casting spells. My guess was that the lull in the action was the sexual union of two members in a spell casting exercise. Fortunately, my unexplained map allowed me to last through the night so that I could observe the guests as they left shortly before sunrise. To my amazement, none of the departing Satanists looked as though they had just completed a night of debauchery. None looked disheveled, drunk, or even tired for that matter. Their dress was as immaculate as when they first arrived, and they all bid their host, the Hastings, a pleasant good day as though they had just visited for an afternoon cup of coffee. They all shook hands and then patted Blank on the head. Some even hugged the dog's neck in what I thought was an over-the-top show of affection for an animal that most of the guests probably didn't see all that regularly. In a 24-hour corner coffee shop a few doors down from the building, I went over the evidence I had gathered. It was clear to me that the event I had witnessed that night before was not simply a cocktail party, but was a magical ritual with a decidedly black magic or left-hand path bent. There is little that can be done when people have ceremonies in their own apartments aside from complaining to the authorities about the noise or the possibility of the assault. So the problem was really in what the tenants had been experiencing and attributing to the Hastings. What made the case more difficult was that the Hastings had lived in the building for many years without problems. They were always thought of as somewhat eccentric, but never a problem. It occurred to me that the building itself may have been the cause of the paranormal event. Sadie's bugs, the odors, banging hallway doors, and the dog's changing eyes, and that the Hastings' dark leanings could have been the catalyst that put the weird events into motion. Most practitioners of the occult rarely perform rituals in the correct prescribed manner, usually opting to modify the magic to suit their tastes and whims. Historically, this has been disastrous, resulting in horrific physical assaults and sometimes even explosion, especially in cases where would-be sorcerers attempt to conjure demons to do their own bidding. So I wondered if something might have gone awry in Hastings' apartments that set off disturbances throughout the building. It was time to talk to the Hastings and get to the bottom of their satanic soiree. I was pleased that the Hastings were open to discussing this matter with me. In fact, they even expressed delight that I might want to talk to them about what I described as strange things happening in their building. They were both dressed in black pants and shirts when they invited me into their apartment one Saturday evening at 9. I was immediately struck by the number of occult and horror movie objects evident in their kitchen, which was the first room I saw as I entered the apartment. What was particularly obvious were the satanic objects that seemed to be everywhere. There were dolls, statues, magnets, signs, and a number of books on horror and the occult. I've seen every manner of weird houses and apartments during my investigations, and although the accoutrements of the Hastings apartments were indeed devilish, I didn't pick up on any foreboding or negative energy vibes that are usually associated with a malevolent presence or negative disturbance. In fact, the surroundings were quite homey, despite the furnishings and the lack of natural light. I explained the neighbors' problem and concerns about demons and curses, which the Hastings laughed off as hysterical rumors from old women who don't know what to do with their time. And I was surprised when I asked them point blank if they were Satanists. Yes, we are. We are members of a satanic church, Arthur said without flinching. He added that he was aware of the curse thrown at Sadie and that his fellow Satanists like to spook nosy people. It's just Andrew fooling around, he said. After some conversation about the rituals they performed for their religion and their philosophy of hurting no one unless defending themselves, which sounded perfectly in line with most people's philosophies, I was convinced that if they were guilty of conjuring a demonic presence, it must have been done accidentally. However, both Arthur and Caroline were well versed in the magical arts, so I doubted that they had erred ushered in the spell casting. The couple did admit to recently having ceremonies conducted in the apartment because it was their turn as they progressed in the organization. And I was a bit shocked and embarrassed when they told me that they were well aware that I was spying on them. We're used to being outcast and people prying, Caroline said. People just don't like anything or anyone who's not like them. They're all sheep and they want everyone to be sheep. I left the Hastings apartment satisfied that if they were responsible for the strange phenomenon, it was a product of some paranormal anomaly and then not deliberate. They were charming and gracious and actually invited me to sit in on a ritual in the near future. Of course, it didn't explain any of the paranormal events or the bugs in Sadie's place, but it wasn't the first time a case had gone unexplained. As I left, I shook both of their hands and then bent down to pat Blank's head goodbye. I wasn't sure, but I remembered one of the tenants saying that one of the building's mysteries was how the dog's eyes changed from black to green whenever it was seen outdoors. But as I peered into the dog's eyes that stared at me as if they were human, the eyes were neither black nor green. Blank's eyes were distinctly brown. I learned that the disturbances finally stopped at the building about a month after the investigation when Aggie called to say hello. She said that everything now seemed to be back to normal, and although the Hastings still lived in 7S, the parties had stopped. I asked if anything else changed since I left, and after a few moments of thought, Aggie said, "Well, not much, except that the big black dog in 7S isn't there anymore. Someone said it ran away." Then that's it. That's everything having to do with Chapter 5, The Satanist Next Door, from the book Occult Investigator, Real Cases from the Files of Ex-Investigation by Bob Johnson. Let's go ahead and let's talk about that here. First off, I think this is the first chapter where there really isn't a satisfying ending, right? It seems like it still was left open into the air as to what had happened. Obviously, the couple that was there, the Hastings, they readily admitted they were Satanists, and then clearly the evidence that Bob Johnson gathered showed that they were doing all these ceremonies on a weekly basis, not just because of obviously like the eyewitness accounts, but now he was seeing that as well. But what was left unexplained was what he was mentioning about the paranormal activity. What about that curse, right? That the neighbor was stating that she swore she had placed on her by one of those Satanists. Also, what about the deal with the bed bugs? I mean, those water bugs that were essentially all gathered en masse that she had a photo of there too. What about that weird aura, right? That they were mentioning the neighbors were every time they went there or came back from church, how they were always arguing and it was just a negative energy. Or about the strange smells or the strange sounds. Lots of strange things just basically happening in and around that hallway and then leading up to the other buildings too. On top of that, what about the dog, right? I didn't mention the dog's name again because the dog was named after something that you shouldn't really say out loud, so I didn't mention it here. But that was very, very unique too. The fact that the dog's eyes changed colors 3 times. You had it from being black, green, and then now brown, as Bob Johnson mentioned. And then now all of a sudden everything stopped whenever the dog ran away, quote unquote. Here you have the hint that this dog could be something else, just completely different. That line that they mentioned towards the end about everyone when they were leaving from that group, whenever walking away from that ceremony, how they almost reverently hugged that dog as if it was something else. That was so creepy. That actually gave me a little chills when I was thinking about it because it made me wonder again if that dog was something else. And it was hinted at obviously multiple times with regards to it being something very, very unholy. And the fact that it ran away and then everything else in the building started to be A-OK makes it seem too much of a coincidence on there. But otherwise, it was a little frustrating to read too that there's not much, right, that could be done. Not unless they're not paying rent or they're just overall causing too much headache, too much hassle, and then finally they can be kicked out. It looks like that couple decided to tone things down afterwards too. But otherwise, that's it. It's just an unsatisfying ending to this chapter because nothing really was accomplished, and at the same time, you can't really blame the situation. It was one of those things where it was almost like bound to happen when it came to, Bob Johnson's investigation, so he was right to point that out. But let me know what you guys think. Post those comments below. All right, everybody. Thanks again as always. Take care.